Hi, I'm Andrew Castleberry.
I'm Austin Rowland.
So today what we're talking about is kind of starting a series really that's rooted in something that's a theme we've seen over the last few years of people coming to us with expectations of what financial planning is and then not knowing what financial planning actually is. So what we wanted to do is a series on what is financial planning, but do it through a lens of case studies we have actually worked on, helped implemented, talked to real individuals about that really, I think, reflect what financial planning at its root actually is. Because it's easy to it's actually really hard to define financial planning. But what I say it's easy to define as what most people consider it as is investment management. They say, hey, I have a Roth IRA. I have a guy, he buys a stock or a mutual fund, calls me once a year, tells me I'm up, and I'm good to go. I hear that all the time. It's like, oh yeah, I got a guy, mutual funds, this is fine. Not at all financial planning. You have an investment portfolio. Again, not financial planning. So that's the root of this. Is just what is actually financial planning? Why is it useful? Why should you do it? Why should you not do it ultimately? But through the lens of actual cases, rather than just trying to define it as, hey, we have a video that says it needs to have at least these 4 questions answered. Go watch that. I think it's actually called Bare Minimums of Financial Planning, or What is Financial Planning? Kind of as a start of this, but this is going to be going into real scenarios. So kind of awesome. What are we talking about today?
Yeah, so I think just to piggyback off that real quick, a lot of folks, whether it's DIY investors or DIY, they're handling their own financial planning or they've worked with an advisor before. Financial planning often looks like an Excel spreadsheet where here's my account balance today, here's a growth rate, I'm even including some inflation, maybe some different Social Security claiming ages if you're getting fancy. But that's what their definition of a financial plan is, hey, I already got one. I've thought about my expenses and all these different things and I've plugged it in and the numbers work. When I cast out 40, 50, 60 years, the numbers look like they work. And for us, financial planning incorporates so much more personal financial questions that people have that are specific to them and things that are not financial at all. Their values, the goals they have in life, family dynamics. There's a whole host of things that go into a financial plan. So when somebody asks me what a financial plan looks like, I often say, hey, look, if it touches your financial life in any way, shape, or form, it needs to be included in a financial plan. It's not just these basic bare minimums like we mentioned in that video. It's really your whole life. So today what we're going to be doing is talking about...
Before we jump in,
go ahead.
To your point, I've seen a lot of DIY spreadsheets.
Yeah.
If you're including inflation...
Some of them are pretty good.
Yeah. I've seen 3 that have actually had inflation. So that's first and foremost. Most of them, too, have a really straight assumption on returns that is overly optimistic. The thing I've never seen is that I was like, all right, well, what happens in 10 years when you replace your roof or your AC unit? And they're like, oh, I don't know. I'm like, you'll...
Right.
Well, what about when you replace your car? I'm like, well, I bought my last car. And I'm like, you're 58.
You might have to buy it again.
I was like, your car going to last you till you're 90? I was like, is that going to be a 3-decade car? I was like, you rocking a 1980s Toyota at that point? And then it comes down to you're not. So you need to kind of have that baked in. But kind of to your point, it's those things those are still financial questions, but having to drop $45,000 every 8 years on a car, which is reasonable if it's a 2-household car. I mean, that's a 16-year replacement rate. Or having to plan for needing $15,000 every 10 years for major appliances, hot water heater. Those are things that I would argue aren't even part of the conversation around goals, but just actual necessities that I've never once seen someone be like, oh yeah, I threw these in every blah, blah, blah. But that takes something that, hey, was good to now suddenly I'm having to drop hundreds of thousands of dollars more over the course of 25 to 30 years that is significantly impactful. So again,
100%. There's not a clean spot in the spreadsheet for those things all the time.
No,
so
it's not to say you can't do a DIY, but it is one of those things where I find a lot of DIY people, if they don't hyperinflate their expenses, things like that aren't accounted for.
Yeah. So this is a great example of what real financial planning looks like on a day-to-day basis, where we're going to go over a case study for a client that Andrew has. So We've changed the names, we've changed the numbers for confidentiality purposes, just to make sure that we're keeping that information safe. But today we're going to be talking about the names of the people are Margaret. So Margaret is Andrew's client. She's in her late 80s, if I'm assuming correctly. So she's in her late 80s. Margaret's son, David, and his wife, Sarah, have come to Andrew, and they've kind of started having a conversation. They're not clients, but their mother is. And they're just asking, hey, our mom is about to need some sort of assisted living. She's not completely, dependent on a nursing home quality level of care yet, but she does need assisted living. So she's moved into an assisted living facility. She has land. I believe it's in Florida. Is that correct?
It's in Georgia.
It's in Georgia.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's in Georgia. She has land. There's 4 different parcels.
Correct.
She lives on one parcel. The other 2 parcels are kind of pasture. And then the 4th parcel, David and his wife, Sarah, have built a home on and raised their family in.
Correct.
Okay, so that's the starting point. They are thinking that they want to sell the land to help cover some of the expenses for their mom's long-term care assisted living expenses.
Correct.
So they've come to you and said, hey, we're selling the land. We've talked to a CPA. What do you think?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So they come in. The entire assumption is they're selling the land. Now, the issues with selling, and I say issues, the reality of selling the land is the mom has had it forever at that point. So when I say forever, it's forever at that point. Like dawn of time. No, not dawn of time, but essentially long enough to where the original purchase of the property is either unknown or extremely low. So with it, she has been in her, she's lived in her primary home, so one of those parcels, for 2 of the last 5 years. But they're coming up on that getting timed out. So that parcel she could sell and have the primary home exclusion for $250,000. That's where that is. The other 2 parcels would be taxed at capital gains rates for right now. That being said, we don't know what the cost basis is. So the total value of selling all 3 of those parcels would be about $900,000. The assumption for the kids coming in was we're going to sell those 3 parcels and use those proceeds to pay for our mom's care. Now, what that looks like is that's about $108,000 roughly of tax on that sale, that asset sale. Now, and again, they've worked with a CPA. They're getting exacts on it, working through cost basis. And with something like this, we highly, highly, highly recommend you work with a CPA to kind of make sure everything's processed correctly and optimize everything. We are not tax planners, like tax advisors per se. We are financial planners. We are dangerous when it comes to planning around tax planning, but we are not filing taxes for our clients. We're not tax preppers at that point. So there's areas of knowledge we just don't know. So I'm working with a very high level kind of knowledge of this and working with what they've told me, their CPA has told me, and trying to run some scenarios for them. Now, in talking to them, I was just kind of asking, I was like, hey, you're selling all the land around your house. Like, what does that do for you guys? They are like, yeah, well, that's kind of sucks. We've been really used to having pasture around. It's been a lot of privacy, really nice. The husband has a shop that's essentially on one of the parcels that's not theirs, that has all his woodworking equipment. So if they did sell, he'd have to move all of that. They don't have space on their parcel for it as well. So again, it's kind of there. And I was kind of asking, I was like, well, why do you have to sell? Would you guys be able to afford just with your assets at that point to pay for it? And they were like, oh, well, we've never really thought of it. And I was just kind of asking, I was like, well, what do you guys have in assets if you don't mind me asking? And come to find out, they have a $530,000 inherited IRA. Now, for an inherited IRA, for those of you who don't know, there's a couple ways that they're treated. For this particular case, Sarah, the wife, so not Margaret's daughter, but Margaret's daughter-in-law.
Yep.
Yeah, daughter-in-law. At that point, she inherited that in IRA from her father, but inherited it years and years and years ago. So it's grandfathered into the old rule where she has a stretch feature. So she has to take some money out every single year, but she can stretch it over her entire life. So it doesn't have to be depleted in 10 years or anything like that. It's that older rule, which arguably, in my opinion, is a lot better, but not the IRS, and I don't know how to
They don't ask us.
Yeah, so I wish. Written many letters, none get answered. But that being said, she can stretch it. Now, with that, they both have great incomes, both have their own savings, both put in the 401ks, all of that. So the money they have to take out every year is about 17-ish thousand that they don't actually need. They've been using it to pay extra down on their mortgage, just do odds and ends things around the house, but it's not required for anything. So then the question then arises, well, why don't you guys use that to cover your mother's care rather than selling the house? And can we look at that and say, is the tax liability for you guys doing that less than it would be for the one-time hit on selling your mom's land and getting a massive capital gains hit? And then if you did that, is your financial plan in a good enough position to where you could do that and it not negatively affect you? So what that turned into was that meeting turned into 2 meetings. So, and this is where I get to kind of part of our jobs as planners. It's not to get the client out of the door as quickly as possible. Like we know our clients are tight on time. We ask for a decent amount of like pre-meeting prep and stuff like that. But we want to make sure we use our time as useful as possible. So an annual review for most people is anywhere from 45 to 2 hours, depending on one, how talkative I am and how talkative they are and what we're going over. No one's accused me of ever being short of an answer there. So that being said, though, it turned into, all right, well, now we don't just have to look at the plan for Margaret. We have to look at the plan for Sarah and David to say, not only does it make more tax sense to have them pay for it, but with the level of need she would have, could they afford it and it not negatively affect them from when they want to retire, what they need to spend in retirement, and their full financial plan? So what we agreed to was we'd meet again. They would get me their info so I could build out their plan, and we would essentially run their plans side by side to say, if we sold the land on one side, and then if we use their assets to fund Margaret on the other side. So first off, if we were to run plan A here, if you want to say, which is the inherited IRA, that's what we're going to look at first, and then we'll look at the subland. One of the things we kind of found out was with the kids, they give on a regular basis. They don't have a mortgage, so they don't get to deduct any mortgage interest, but they do give about 10%. With their incomes, that alone gets them really close to itemizing. Then state income taxes pushes them where they do typically itemize on an annual basis on their return. Also, since they are going to essentially be having to cover more than 50% of Margaret's care, they're going to be able to itemize some of those healthcare costs as well, which again goes into the point where you need to work with an accountant to make sure that is accurately reflected on your return and they can capitalize on that and do that in a way that fits into current tax law. So that allows them a really good base of being able to itemize and take advantage of that. Now, the next thing we have to look at is how much are they actually having to pull out of that inherited IRA to cover their mom's needs. So right now, their mom gets Social Security and a small pension. So what she needs to live on an annual basis is about $30,000 over and above what Social Security and that pension are going to do, which first and foremost should reinforce the idea that if you think Social Security is going to cover all of your expenses and you are not saving anything, you are poorly mistaken because it doesn't. But back to this. So that being said, that's what they need to generate. Now, the inherited IRA generates about $17,000 in a required minimum distribution. We ran it as if we needed to generate $50,000, just because, again, kind of to your point, setting it up. Right now, she doesn't need full nursing home care. She's in an assisted living, but it's independent living. She just couldn't manage an entire house. So they essentially moved her into kind of like an independent condo at that point. So the $30,000 is fine now, but they don't know how long it'll be before she needs more care. Right now, she's relatively healthy for like a mid-80s at that point. Now, if they were to pull that $50,000 out, so they already have to take 17. If they were to just make it 50, what we kind of ran it and looked at is it's roughly adding to their federal tax liability, give or take about $7,000 to $8,000 a year. Now, if we think back, the land added about a little over 100, like $108,000 to $110,000 of cost. So what we looked at is if they had to do that for like the next 10 years, they would just now be kind of getting to the point, depending on tax law, of having a lot of runway for them to use the inherited IRA and still keep their total tax liability for care for their mother below that 108. And then when their mother passes, they inherit the property because David's an only child at that point, and they get a step up in cost basis. So again, they're not having a huge capital gain, and they get that massive step up in cost basis. The other thing too is assuming a just really regular 6 to 7% growth rate, their inherited IRA would probably still be somewhere in the $400,000 range. Again, that's the part where we typically run a Monte Carlo report, so that can be a few $100,000 range there, depending on what that market looks like over that period. But it is one of those things where that works, and that works essentially under the idea that they're able to do that all the way through their mom potentially living into their 90s to late 90s. Now, first off, it was kind of nice. They were pleasantly surprised to know that was even an option. They hadn't thought about it. They were also kind of pleasantly surprised to say that would be a better tax liability. The thing that they had a question on, though, is they were already kind of bought in on moving, which is, as we were talking about this, they had time between that first meeting and this meeting to think more and more about, hey, do we want to move? Come to find out, they'd already built a privacy fence under the assumption they'd sell it. They'd already built a second driveway for the back lot to be able to drive in and not to share their driveway at that point. So in thinking about it, they had already been like, well, what if we just sold our house too at that point and said, you know what, if we sell all of it, it'll be easier to sell it as one big portion. What if we just sold it to a developer, which would probably be what they'd be looking at anyways, and just said, hey, it'll just be a full demo and just build a small neighborhood or something like that. So we looked at that, and if we sold just the mom's portion, it's about 108. They have the primary home exclusion, so there's no real tax liability to them. But it came down to the two kind of ideas where both work from a planning standpoint. But one strategy where they use their inherited IRA, it's about $7,000 of additional tax a year, and they stay there and they don't sell any land. I should note, they talk to their kids. The kids don't want to move onto the land, so that's another factor of them wanting to move. The other side is they essentially sell everything because they don't want to live next to a development and just have the mom pay the taxes. They have a pool of money, and they know it's probably not the most advantageous, but it might fit better for their overall lifestyle at that point. And then it comes into the harder questions, is what happens if they sell the land and their mom dies in a year? What happens if they sell their land and the mom dies in 3 years? What happens if they don't sell and the mom lives to be 105 and suddenly what was not a major negative effect to their plan is a major negative effect to their plan, and they just have to sell the land? In 10 years now, it's appreciated even more, and that tax liability
has
not only
grown.
It's grown, but also they just spent 10 years adding to it at that point unnecessarily. So that's when it gets into kind of the harder questions of those aren't financial. Those are what ifs, and it becomes what ifs on what I like to call the utility of a plan. Is the utility having the family land, staying there, not having to move, having the kind of sentiment of that family land, and knowing it could negatively affect you if your mom lived statistically, probably not likely, but into her hundreds? Or is it just selling a partial and staying there, but potentially having weird neighbors or a complex next to you? Or is it just, hey, moving isn't great, but just selling everything all at once? And again, operating under the assumption that they can sell at the same time, because that is something that's they, one, have been looking for a house, can't find anything, and two, they don't know if it's going to sell in a year or sell in 2 years or sell in 3 years just with the current market, and potentially having to sell it in individual parcels at that point. So that's where we came down to. And again, that's the planning side. That's the number side. And you had made, because I've been talking to you for weeks now and kind of building it and kind of doing the back end. And I think you made a really good point, is ultimately it comes down to, they were like, well, what's your recommendation? Which maybe my least favorite question I get in a meeting is, what's your recommendation? So, I mean, for that, how do you typically address that? Because the way I view it is both of these work. Neither put Margaret at risk or Sarah and David at risk. Neither blow their plan up. Both have pros, both have cons. And it becomes a utility question.
Yeah, a matter of personal preference.
But that's not a recommendation.
Right.
That is a politician's answer.
Right. Yeah. Clients would probably prefer if we just gave them a single answer. Hey, here's the right answer. And we can do that sometimes with math. You know, here's the technically correct answer. You're going to end up with a higher dollar amount at the end of your life if you do one thing versus another thing. But to your point, life is subjective. And so depending on, you know, David grew up on this property. His mom owned it long before he was born. He was born there. He grew up there. He built his own house there. He raised his own kids there. There's a lot of memories there. But when it comes to giving a recommendation to a client, it's not our job to tell them what to do. But in this case, it's to present every potential option, all of the ramifications, the good, the bad, the pros, the cons, and then explain to them how that affects their day-to-day life, which, to your point, means that we have to get to know them. We have to ask them questions about themselves, not just their bank accounts or their investment accounts or their assets, liabilities. We have to get to know who they are, what they value, what they want, and then we can at least try to guide them towards a specific option. So, hey, here's the two options. Both of them make sense. We've already established that. But based on what I'm hearing you say to me about how you don't want to sell the land, it would kind of be inconvenient for you. You love the rural aspect of it, the privacy. This is the route I would steer you towards because, one, it's helpful from a tax perspective, but two, it allows you to maintain your current lifestyle.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of those things where it's not a good answer. Like for me, one just not wanting to move. I would probably clearly choose the pay it out of the inherited IRA. But also, if you're already thinking about moving and you're like, you know what, well, we're in South Georgia now, so maybe we do want to move to South Carolina at that point, or move to North Georgia, or move to Florida at that point from South Georgia, then maybe it does make sense to just go ahead and try and sell it as one big package and be fine knowing that, yeah, you probably ended up paying a little bit more taxes than I would say might be plan necessary. But I kind of view it as this is if you've already won the race, which I would say both of these people have, Margaret and Sarah and David, already financially able to cover expenses, either from a land sale or not, in Margaret's standpoint. It's, if you've won the race, does it matter? I kind of want to say how. Like, does it matter the time? Does it matter, did you do it gracefully? Did you do it and pay a little bit more taxes? Did you like pull a hamstring? Or if you finished the finish line, you finished it. It doesn't matter past that. Like you won. So with either one of these, you're winning. It's really just a matter of how much did it cost you. But if one person wins and they were wearing, like it cost them a lot because they were wearing like really nice shoes, or they pulled a hamstring, and another person cruises by with like cheap gear and didn't get injured, no one cares. They both won at that point. It doesn't matter what it cost them at that point because they both got to their end goal and were happy about it. So I kind of view this as, yeah, you have one that's going to essentially, you're moving. The utility of that could be the place you move to is way better. You like it, or you can start new memories, and it's like a refresh at that point. You pay taxes, that's the price of it. The utility is still the same. One is you stay there, you try and pay Uncle Sam as least as possible, and it either works or it doesn't work, but you still win. It's just a matter of how you're doing it. You're staying at the family land, you're staying in South Georgia, you're able to kind of maintain at that point. So that would be how I view it. Again, that's not I recommend this or that. It's just, that's what you have available to you. And I think that's the hard part of planning is you do have planners out there that are just going to be like, oh, well, it doesn't, like, keep the money in the brokerage, in the inherited IRA, because the growth rate's going to be better than the land rate and the opportunity. Because that's the other thing is you'll have people argue like the opportunity cost of what the growth in that inherited IRA could have been over that 10 years surpasses the savings of the tax rate. So you get those arguments in there. And again, that's warranted. The math on that probably makes sense too. But it is one of those things, is it worth selling the land?
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's not all about the dollars.
Exactly.
And I think another planner in our firm likes to reference a quote from the former president, Dwight Eisenhower, who said, plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. So when it comes to a situation like this, we can build a plan. We can give you two scenarios. We can talk about which one may make the most sense. But at the end of the day, you have to pick what is ultimately going to allow you to enjoy the assets that you or your family have saved for this purpose.
Yeah.
We have a lot of conversations with pre-retirees and retirees about maximizing or optimizing or being the most tax efficient. And it's like, hey, let's slow down. You started a long time ago saving and investing and planning and hoping for a day where you could use those assets for blank. What's the blank?
Yeah.
That's the end point. That's the actual goal.
Yeah, and once you have that, then you optimize from there.
Correct.
So once they make the decision of, hey, we want to do this, now it's back into, all right, here's the decision you made. Doesn't break your plan. You're not destitute. You're happy with it. Now
let's plan.
Going forward at that point. Now we balance everything else. Until we get that decision, it's, okay, cool. Let's make that decision, and then we can optimize. But here are the two avenues that work for you at that point. But do you know that Eisenhower was a master's member at Augusta?
He's one of the only presidents who is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or was.
Yeah. Rest in peace.
But that was it, guys. So again, we'll be kind of putting more and more of these out here just to kind of show what planning is. But appreciate your time. And any final comments from you?
Nope. I think that's it. I think that's a great example. I mean, I think in your specific scenario, you could have decided, hey, I work with the mom, Margaret. The kids think it's a good idea to sell the land. I'll help them facilitate the process. And if Margaret needs anything, she can let me know.
Yeah.
That would have been the easiest thing to do, but
a lot less work.
Certainly a lot less work. But in this scenario, it made a lot of sense to sit down with the son and daughter, talk about what their options were, and then give them the opportunity.
Even if they ended up selling the land,
right.
And all that was
wasted.
Wasted
You gave them the information and opportunity to make a decision that could have benefited them better or worse either direction.
Yeah, perfect. Well, perfect. Well, guys, we'll be putting more of these out, and have a great afternoon, morning, or evening, depending on when you're watching this. So